Hello folks, welcome to UFOs Around the World. This is going to be a short video, but it's an interesting one. So as we know, Bob Lazar was brought to the forefront by George Knapp many years ago, 1989 I think it was. And Eric Davis recently on an interview with Dave Z said something very interesting, that behind the scenes George Knapp is a bit unsure about Bob Lazar. Now, if this is true, and he has doubts about Bob Lazar, why does he never aired this? Is it because he's gone too far with him and he doesn't think he'll lose credibility if he says Bob's talking shit? But this is interesting, so take a listen to this.
What is the likelihood that instead of seeing a UFO near Groom Lake, as Bob Lazar and John Lear claimed, what is the likelihood they instead saw some type of directed energy proton or laser beam back in the 1980s rather than a UFO near?
Zero, because there
Yeah,
were no technology of that nature back then, especially at Area 51. Protons were not used, and lasers were, but laser work was done in another part of the country at another laboratory. And
gotcha.
Area 51 doesn't have a laboratory to begin with. It's not a laboratory. So the answer is zero. And Bob Lazar and John Lear, I wouldn't put any stock in anything they say because there are a couple of nutcases. And we already know that George Knapp investigated Bob Lazar, and as much as he's been promoting him over the years, George knows on a private basis that Bob Lazar is a problem. And I've investigated him with a former Area 51 program manager who's a member of the Roadrunners Retiree Association. He knew Bob Lazar's female supervisor, and
Gotcha.
he got the poop on Bob Lazar's employment, which did not take place in Area 51. It took place in an unclassified logistical support facility way outside of Area 51. He never had to take a Janet flight out there. He stayed in Vegas. He worked
Gotcha.
from Vegas. And
Gotcha.
then he ran an illegal prostitution operation at the same time.
Yeah, there's some. I know that people that have promoted Lazar don't like bringing that aspect of his life up, but I think it's
But
fair
that's
to bring
but
it.
that's how
Yeah,
you do forensic profiling. We're not saying he's a criminal. It's
right.
just a profiling of somebody who's made outrageous claims, which everybody at Area 51 are looking at each other like, what the fuck? And
Right.
uh, and so and then you got George Knapp, who's promoting him a lot. Um, he has said, so what the fuck? But he just kind of says, well, you got the story. But I think George is missing a beat somewhere, and I'm not sure why. He knows all the people I worked with who investigated Bob Lazar, and that includes Colonel John Alexander, or Dr. John Alexander, Colonel U.S. Army retired, who was responsible for Bob Bigelow hiring me at NIDS in July of '96.
Gotcha.
And so John Alexander was right out of Los Alamos at the time. He was the father of the non-lethal weapons laboratory at Los Alamos, and he did that after 32, maybe more than 32 years in the Army.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So John Alexander spent quite a bit of time in the army, that's for sure.
Yeah, and when you're the chief of staff to the commanding general of the Army Intelligence and Security Command, you can pull a lot of resources in the government to look into guys like Lazar, and he did.
Got you. Got
He
you.
did when he looked into Phil Corso.
So, wow, that's some claim that George Knapp behind the scenes has doubts about Bob Lazar. Now, he's always, he's been on Joe Rogan with him. I think it was one of Joe Rogan's biggest ever podcasts when it was at Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, and Bob Lazar. Why would George not just come out and say if he's got doubts about him? He's still quite recently stuck up for Bob Lazar and said, "Listen, Bob Lazar's telling the truth." And they go over this thing which really winds me up. They say, "Oh, he's not changed his story in the 30 years he's been telling it." It's like, right, that doesn't mean he's telling the truth. I could tell you a lie now and then tell you the same lie 30 years later. I don't understand why they hang the fucking hat on that. I really don't. I don't really trust this guy either, Eric Davis, to be honest with you. He seems a dodgy fucker as well. He said some weird stuff over the last couple of months. So I don't know. I think everybody's very interested in Bob Lazar. I think everybody trusts George Knapp. It's an interesting one. It'd be interesting to see what George Knapp says to this, whether he comes out and says Eric's talking shit. I fully back Bob Lazar. You got to remember as well, it was quite recently Bob Lazar, George Knapp said that when Bob Lazar, if Bob Lazar was to die, he would know where to go and get the element 115 that is hidden in under a tree or something. That's very odd for someone that in the background is saying he doesn't believe him. So I don't know. Like I said, it's just going to be a short video, this one, guys. I'm tired, but this is a very interesting. This is very interesting, especially with what's coming out with Bob Lazar this year and Louis Vendatelli. We've got a documentary on his life and stuff like that, and what he did, and also the VR S4 base where you can go into the virtual world and actually see this S4 base as Bob Lazar did. And if you're using augmented reality, you'd be able to touch these things and touch the craft and all that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting, the timing of this as well. It's one of them. I'm on the fence with Bob Lazar. I really don't know. I can understand why they go against him, and then I can understand, like Jon Stewart said, there's a list. The list's there that he was there in a recent interview. That list hasn't been shared yet, though, that shows that he was at this location, the S4 base. I think it's for 90 days, minimum of 90 days. So it's interesting. It's interesting for sure. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, please drop a like, drop a subscription, and that's about it, really. As always, I love you and leave you, and I'll see you on the next one. Good night.